With nearly 5,000 specialists dedicated to supporting dealer financial services, Ally has the expertise to help you with your retail finance, F&I, and remarketing needs. We're all better off with an Ally. Contact your local Ally account executive to get started today. Ally, do it right.
Welcome to Daily Drive for Friday, September 12th, 2025. I'm Jake Neer in Detroit, in for Kellen Walker. Today on the show, Hyundai-LG workers return home after being detained by ICE while South Korea asks for a new visa program. We'll hear from attorney Charles Cook, who's representing some of the workers arrested in last week's raid.
Two automotive folks have reached out that produce automotive parts. How do we make sure this doesn't happen to us?
GM CEO Mary Barra says agility and resiliency are key to navigating a changing industry, and GM is forced to close part of its tech center over Legionnaire's disease cases. Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry. South Korea Foreign Minister Cho Hyun is calling on Congress in the U.S. to support a new visa for Korean businesses. That's as some 300 Hyundai-LG workers returned home to emotional reunions with families 1 week after being detained in a U.S. immigration raid that left some questioning whether they would ever be willing to work in the U.S. again. The ministry said in a statement that during his meetings with U.S. senators in Washington, Cho reiterated concerns among South Koreans over the arrests of Korean professionals that participated in investment projects in the U.S. The South Korean workers were held for a week by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement before flying back to their home country. We'll hear more about this story in a minute with attorney Charles Cook. On Thursday at Automotive News Congress, General Motors CEO Mary Barra credited the automaker's agility and resiliency for helping it make long-term decisions in a time of uncertainty and upheaval. Barra says GM has stayed focused on what she called no-regret moves that set it up for the future, including its transition toward electric vehicles.
How do you make those big bets, but do it in a way where, in some cases, it's how long can I wait before I have to make the final decision? We spent a lot of time as a leadership team looking at those trade-offs and really trying to say, no matter what, we know we want to do this for these reasons.
At the same time, she added GM executives have taken the lead from customers as they weigh how and when to make big bets on future technology. We'll hear more from Mary Barra's conversation at Automotive News Congress with publisher Casey Crane in just a minute. And GM has closed one of its main engineering buildings on its Warren Technical Center campus near Detroit after two of its employees tested positive for Legionnaire's disease. The automaker says it closed Cole Engineering Center Wednesday evening after being notified by the Macomb County Health Department of the positive tests. While the building has not been confirmed as the source of the disease, it will remain closed until at least September 22nd, pending further results. And those are today's headlines. You can find more details on all of those stories at autonews.com. As I mentioned a minute ago, our publisher, Casey Crane, sat down Thursday with GM CEO Mary Barra on stage at Automotive News Congress in Detroit, which happened to take place inside the building GM will soon call its global headquarters. They talked about the state of flux in the industry at the moment and the role of the consumer in GM's decision-making. Here's an excerpt from their conversation.
I was talking a little bit about uncertainty, and I think it's fair to say you've led General Motors through a lot of different industry shifts. But at the moment, with tariffs and trade realignments, supply chain changes, it's a little unique, and I think our times are a little bit unprecedented. General Motors have kept products flowing to customers, invested billions in U.S. manufacturing, and you've done a nice job sourcing parts to stay competitive. So this is a very large question, but how do you think about leading in this environment? What's your framework for making long-term decisions so that General Motors can manage to stay strong no matter how this evolves?
Well, if you go back 5 years, I mean, we've been through so much as a country, as a world, as an industry. think about COVID, you think about the semiconductor shortage, you think about the impact that had on our suppliers. And we're still, I think, working through that while we're dealing with tariffs. And you didn't mention a fairly big shift from a regulatory perspective, from a GHG and emissions perspective. But one of our senior leaders said, as we were in a meeting planning, he said, I think through all this, one of our superpowers has become agility and resiliency of, okay, here's the situation, what do we do? So I think to answer your question, it starts by having a great team.
Yeah.
And we've got really strong leaders. We have a mixture of people who have joined the company over the last few years. We have people who have been there a long time, like I have. And then it's looking at what are those no regret moves. I personally believe from an EV perspective, that is still our North Star, because I think fundamentally, as the charging infrastructure builds out, the vehicles, they're fun to drive, cost of ownership is lower from a gas perspective, and you never have to go to a gas station. So I think we're on that journey, but we've got to be led by the customer.
Yeah.
And so staying focused on the customer, looking at how do you make those big bets, but do it in a way where, in some cases, it's how long can I wait before I have to make the final decision? And that's what we spent a lot of time as a leadership team looking at those trade-offs and really trying to say, no matter what, we know we want to do this for these reasons.
Yeah, speaking of customers, you might have to build a few more of those Corvettes, because there's been a couple of questions about whether that one's for sale or not.
That one, I am so proud of. I'm so proud of the whole product development team that works together to do that. But the Corvette, it's pretty special.
So in all seriousness, you've talked a lot about putting the customer at the center of what you guys do. Whether they want an EV, a hybrid, ICE engines, your strategy pretty much reflects that. You're growing EV volumes, you're also investing in ICE where it makes sense. How do you think about balancing that portfolio, and how do the company's investments fit what the customers want and what you're hearing from them?
Well, I think for the most part, obviously up until a year ago, we were on a journey to be in a regulatory environment where we had to drive EV adoption much faster. And with the IRA going away, we're still all going to learn where we're at once that ends and we get through the pull ahead volume. But again, I think one of the great things we've done is, if you look at our Spring Hill, Tennessee plant that builds both ICE and EV, so we can flex between what the customer wants. We've been very focused with as we put together the EV portfolio, not just to replicate what we had from an internal combustion, but to say how do we make sure we have affordable, we have luxury, we have the right segments. So it was a very strategic portfolio, and I'm very pleased right now that we've got this portfolio that still meets the customer where we are, and each of them are beautifully designed vehicles. So from an ICE perspective, we've looked the same way. And to that point, there was a couple decision points over the last couple of years where, if we started a new program, we said, okay, when do we need to really make the decision what we're going to do? And what were the milestones along the way? As we gained more information, we're like, yes, we're going to do that program from an internal combustion. So it's really, you've got to kind of do things under a number of scenarios, and then you do find a common set, though.
Yeah. Wasn't always the easiest with all the pressure.
Wasn't always the easiest, but that's the industry we're in, and it's such an exciting industry.
GM CEO Mary Barra spoke with publisher Casey Crane at Automotive News Congress in Detroit. After the program, she gave our own Lindsay Van Hully and Nick Bunkley an exclusive interview, which you'll hear on Monday and Tuesday right here on Daily Drive. Coming up, an attorney representing some of the South Korean workers who were detained by ICE last week joins the show to talk about what they experienced and what it means for foreign companies thinking about making big investments in the U.S. going forward. We'll hear from Charles Cook next on Daily Drive.
For over 100 years, Ally has helped dealers like you serve your customers by providing the best-in-class products and services you need, and by remaining true to the automotive passion we share. Your dedicated Ally account executive will work hand in hand with you to help you gain efficiencies, increase your product offerings, and work to improve per-vehicle revenue. Because we care about your business as much as you do. We're all better off with an Ally. Contact your local Ally account executive to get started today. Ally, do it right.
Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Jake Neer. With hundreds of Hyundai-LG workers now back in South Korea after being detained by ICE last week, questions now swirl about what happened leading up to and during the immigration raid, and what it means for foreign companies that are thinking about investing in the U.S. Earlier this week, our own Molly Boygan spoke with attorney Charles Cook, founding partner at Cook Baxter, who represents some of the Hyundai-LG workers.
Charles Cook, founding partner at Cook Baxter, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
How many clients of yours were impacted by the raid at the Hyundai-LG site last week?
We had 12 individual clients that we've been asked to assist as part of this raid. 2 of them were actually DACA recipients. They weren't Koreans. They were DACA recipients working in construction on the site, legally allowed to do what they were doing. And the rest were individuals employed within the fabrication part of the plant as they readied it for operations.
Can you tell us a bit more about the type of work that your clients were doing and why these different companies were relying on, in some cases, DACA recipients and in other cases, foreign workers?
Well, let's look at the different part. I'll do DACAs first because that's easy. They're construction workers. They live in South Georgia. They lived there since they were 2. That's what they do. So if you want to build a building, those are the kind of guys you're going to hire. But the Koreans and some Japanese that were on site, they are subcontractors of Hyundai, and they provide the specialized equipment that's used to fabricate batteries. Right? We don't make that equipment in the United States. You can't go to New Jersey and buy a battery plant or a parts for a battery plant. You import that from abroad, whether that's Japan or Germany or Korea. And so if Hyundai, as part of the $7 billion plant, wants to get that plant up and operating as quickly as possible, they're going to go to the source of the labor and the product as quickly as they can. Now, of course, we live in the United States, and our immigration laws are, at best, antiquated. Keeping in mind the last time we revised them was 1990. Okay, so think what kind of cars they were making in 1990. That's our immigration laws. And so there isn't really a visa that's a special visa for, hey, I'm going to come in and I'm bringing this giant piece of equipment and I'm going to get it bolted to the floor and I'm going to make sure it's operating and I'm going to service it. What we would call after-sales service and installation. We don't really have a visa for that. But we need that. Obviously, we need to have that type of person be able to come to the United States because we don't have them here. We can't provide that labor. So we put this under the B1 Business Visitor Program. B is just a category that we describe people who are coming temporarily to the United States, either for tourism, which is a B2, or business, B1. And that type of business, a lot of people think of, well, that's just meetings. Well, no, it's not just meetings. It can be for investment purposes. You could be coming for oversight. You can be coming for project reviews. But you can also come and do after sales installation and service. And so there was a number of individuals that had actual B1s. They'd actually gone to the consulate and said, here is why I need to go to America. Letter from their employer. Consulate, you're right, I agree, you can go. And then when they landed in Atlanta, and then they appeared in front of Customs and Border Protection, the friendly guys in black uniforms and the guns that are behind the glass. They also said, hey, I'm coming for this. I said, great, come on in. Now, there was a large group, however, that didn't have B1 visas. Well, why? Well, they have ESTA. So the best way to describe this, Molly, is if you go to Paris, you don't go to the French embassy here to get a visa. You just go to Paris, hop on a plane. That's ESTA. It's just, that's our version of it. And to get ESTA, as you're a foreign national, you have to go online at least 3 days before your flight, fill out a form, pass a quick background check, and then you can come to America, either as an ESTA T, I'm coming to Disneyland, I'm a tourist, or an ESTA B, I'm coming for business. It is exactly the same thing as a B1 issued at a consulate, and you can do exactly the same things under an ESTA that you can do under a B1 visa. Except these guys didn't go to the consulate, but they did go to the friendly CBP officer at the airport, presented their documents, showed the letter from their employer, and they were allowed in. So the reason we had them instead of U.S. workers is that there weren't any U.S. workers. I did ask one of my clients about this, one of the companies, and said, well, why don't you have U.S. workers? He said, well, we could. And after they've worked 3 to 5 years in Korea, we will let them go on site and do service and installation. But since Hyundai wanted this plant this year and not in 2029, we have our regular guys.
What did your clients describe about the scene of the raid last week?
It's chaos. First of all, it was a raid, so there was no advance notice. Keep in mind, ICE could have just issued a notice of inspection of I-9s and done an audit and discovered the same problem with workers that didn't have actual papers. So ICE showed up in buses. They had a federal search warrant. That search warrant was based on ICE claiming that there was 4 undocumented workers working on the site. That's the whole basic. But they showed up with multiple buses, believing they were going to arrest about 200 Latino workers. That's what they thought. They ended up arresting about 175 Latino workers, including people that were legally working. So we've got that problem. And then all the Koreans. Now, the Koreans were not doing construction. They weren't putting up walls. They weren't putting on ceilings. They weren't pouring concrete. They were inside the already completed part of the factory, either installing equipment, or many of them were actually in a meeting, in a conference room. One of my young clients had literally arrived the night before and was showing up for a meeting. He was planning to be there a week as part of his job as an engineer, and then he was going back to Korea. He didn't even know what was going on. What is this? It's like a welcome party to America. So it was chaos as they lined them all. You've seen the videos. They lined them all up outside. They then began chaining them. Not just handcuffs, but body chains, ankle irons. As they tried to get them on buses, they had to bring in extra buses because they didn't have enough people there. But it's clear they did not intend to go there to pick up Korean workers because they had no Korean speakers. They had no translator. They ended up using an app on their telephone to try to communicate with the people when the very few Korean English speakers were already off the scene, already in a bus or gone. It appears that somebody thought, wow, these could be really big numbers for this week. Stephen Miller will be very happy. Perhaps we'll just arrest everybody and sort it out later. And now we're in the later part of the problem.
What type of communication have the companies had with your clients? Almost
none. You can only visit them on Saturdays and Sundays, and they couldn't get in on Saturday and Sunday. So the principal contact has been through the consulates. So the Japanese consulate and the Korean consulate have both had access to the individuals there and have communicated on behalf of the companies. And so the companies themselves have literally not had a chance to talk to their employees about what's going on, nor to advise them about the offer, the quote offer, that ICE is now currently making to resolve what is clearly an international incident.
And in terms of the responsibility or obligation or assistance that the companies, may or may not want to provide to their employees, I understand that there's a bit of a complex structure in terms of Hyundai, LG, the joint venture, subcontractors. So are you saying that none of those companies have really had the opportunity to engage with their employees because of the limitations placed on visitation?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, they've all wanted to. I have 5 different employers that I'm working with. They all are super concerned about their employees, really worried about their employees. But long before Korea says, I'm sending a plane, they were like, right away this happened, they're calling. And they're very upset that they don't have access to their employees. We have figured out a way at least to get them some money so they can buy extra food instead of eating bologna sandwiches. I mean, it's a jail. This is not like, oh, it's a nice holding facility with the tennis court. No, this is a jail. So they've been very concerned, but the consulates have been excellent at communication and in working with the companies and with the employees themselves.
What impact do you see this having on foreign companies that are trying to establish manufacturing in the United States?
That's kind of the $100,000 question, isn't it? I know when I've spoken to different reporters about this that work in the financial industry, they've expressed deep skepticism that companies would be willing any longer to even risk that this thing would happen to their German or their other Korean or their Peruvian workers. Why would I even risk this at this point? So I think it's going to have a chilling effect, at least temporarily, and at least until ICE can develop better parameters on issues like this. I mean, you hear, of course, from the radical anti-immigrationists that they should deport everybody. Americans are going to be doing these jobs. They can't, because we simply do not have the product on which these people can work. It's not like, hey, here's how to sweep. You get a broom, you can sweep. These are not sweeping jobs. These are highly technical, highly sophisticated pieces of machinery. I was reading an article about this plant at a visit that had occurred just last week before the raid, and the reporter described it as space age, just completely futuristic. We don't have stuff like that. We just don't. We're not building it. So we import that. Can we? Of course we can. We have the ability, but we need folks to help us get there, which is ironic in many ways. But that's how far we've let manufacturing slip out of our hands, so that we can't do what these companies can do in 2025. So yes, I see and it's not just like cars. I mean, 2 automotive folks have reached out about this, but it's other industries as well that are thinking, oh my goodness, I promised Trump I'm going to invest $500 billion. How? I can't invest that without my people running things, teaching things, servicing things. And your immigration laws stink.
When you say that 2 automotive folks have reached out about this, do you mean that automotive companies have reached out to you about the security of their immigrant workforce in the U.S., or what do you mean by that?
2 manufacturing parts of that produce automotive parts have reached out. How do we make sure this doesn't happen to us? How do we better protect our employees that coming? I mean, we got people that come and go all the time on B1s and ESTA. How do we protect them? How do we make sure that this doesn't happen to us? So, yeah, it's a learning opportunity, but it's also very scary. Nobody wants to spend time in American jails. It's not a pleasant experience.
Charles Cook, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Jake Neer, in for Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News' Lindsay Van Hully and Crane's Detroit Business' Kurt Nagel for their reporting for today's podcast. You can get the latest news on immigration policies, manufacturing, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. Come back over the weekend for our Weekend Drive edition of the show. Our own Molly Boygan and Larry Velaquette talk more about the ICE raid near Savannah and about what happens if the Supreme Court rules President Trump's tariffs illegal.
Consumers who paid these tariffs that were put on your MSRP, do you refund that money? No, you're not going to refund that money. You've already declared it on your P&L statements. It's going to be a mess.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.